Story 1. That is just fine. If they were completely deaf, that would be a real issue because I struggle with learning languages. Story 2. I have a different perspective. I am deaf, and my boyfriend can hear. I believe he would agree. Story 3. When I was single, I dated a deaf person. He was great. Unfortunately, both his mother and father were also deaf and disliked that I wasn't. Even though I began taking classes to learn sign language, they said it wasn't enough and that I would never understand them. He broke up with me. Story 4. Showing respect for each other's experiences and needs, while being supportive, can help build a strong bond. Story 5. I married someone wonderful. He has sufficient hearing to engage in conversation with high-powered hearing aids and lip reading. Without them, he can only hear loud noises. Story 6. Why I respect the intentions of everyone who is saying yes. I think there is quite a bit that people are not aware of. Deaf individuals do not like being seen as disabled. Medical definitions aside, being deaf is a cultural and linguistic identity more than it is a mark of disability. To accurately answer this question, you need to ask yourself a different question. Are you able to date someone from a drastically different culture than you and with a different native language? When phrased that way, it becomes much harder to answer honestly. Deaf individuals are not a single category. Hearing aids are not merely a quick fix that many people think they are. Some choose not to wear aids, and some may not benefit from them at all. Some individuals might engage in spoken conversations and read lips, but that is not a given. If you have ever dated someone from another country or are an immigrant dating a local, you will understand just how difficult it can be at times. The language barrier is a significant hurdle on its own. Not everyone is willing to learn another language for communication. Unless you are prepared to expect the other person to use your native language, which is their non-native language potentially, that is not always a given, and I do not think the question acknowledges most of this nuance. One person using their native language while the other struggles with a non-native language every day can place a significant strain on a relationship over time. On that note, signed languages are not lesser forms of communication. They are not merely gestures that correspond to the spoken language in that country. They are fully developed languages with their own grammar, dialects, and a required understanding of the culture in which the language is used. To rush to say yes to this question is essentially to casually drop a statement like, "Oh yes, I would totally learn a language to date someone," which can seem dismissive to those who learn languages and understand how challenging the endeavor can actually be. In any case, I wanted to provide more information about the deaf community. I am not deaf, but I took a deaf studies class in college and have been fascinated ever since. If there are any deaf individuals, please correct me if I made any mistakes or left something out. Story 7. I eventually ended up marrying her. In addition to my hearing, I am a classically trained musician. I have helped her discover music by focusing on the sounds she can hear. Since she cannot hear low frequencies, anything with bass is out. However, this leaves many symphonic pieces, trumpets, brass, and percussion performances that are loud enough to feel. Story 8. Definitely. However, I bet he would wonder why I am always so quiet, because I am not a talker. Story 9. Yes, especially since I already know American Sign Language for any culturally deaf individuals. It is the best language out there, anyway. Story 10. I was born with a severe hearing impairment, but I am not deaf. I underwent long-term speech therapy, and my type of hearing loss is binaural and degenerative. I currently use hearing aids but honestly dislike them. They feel very unnatural and loud. I can read lips, body language, and tone, but I often have an excuse not to respond because I do not wear my hearing aids. I have dated many people, and my partners have always seemed excited about the prospect of learning to sign with me. Story 11. A deaf person cannot hear at all. A person with hearing aids is hard of hearing, so they are two different individuals. My wife still loves me, even though I have lost 70% of my hearing. Story 12. Why not? As long as we liked each other and he was willing to be patient with me if we both wanted me to learn American Sign Language. Story 13. My girlfriend doesn't hear anything I say anyway, but if they were the right person, why not? Story 14. I would love to know if the community enjoys or dislikes that particular episode of Seinfeld or that specific episode of House. Story 15. Sure. My brother wore hearing aids and he was still cool. I don't think he had any trouble in the dating scene. Story 16. My wife has needed to wear hearing aids since childhood. And after 24 years together, the only way it has affected me is that I completely forget what it is like to watch television without subtitles. Story 17. Hard of hearing and using a hearing aid? That doesn't seem too bad. Are you deaf? If I learned sign language and we got along well, then why not? However, it would probably be quite challenging at first. Story 18. If I were single, I would definitely be open to it. I think I would worry about certain things and feel sad about not being able to share certain experiences together, but I am sure there is plenty we could share. Story 19. I am married and unavailable, but if I were single, I would love to learn sign language. However, that would take a long time, so hearing aids would be essential for communication. Story 20. I don't see it as a significant factor. It's like dating someone who needs glasses. Story 21. I always thought I could, but there was a recent AskReddit question where someone asked about an experience they won't ever forget. Someone said he dated a deaf girl once, and the sound of her moaning during intimacy still haunts him to this day. I would be lying if I said I didn't think about it, and I honestly don't know if I can handle that. Does that make me a bad person? Story 22. I briefly dated a deaf girl in college. We mostly hung out and had occasional hookups. The school I attended had a large deaf community and offered sign language classes for anyone interested. Since there were many attractive deaf girls, I thought I would try talking to some of them. My only complaint was how loud she was during intimacy. I sometimes had to cover her mouth to keep the noise down. Story 23. If I were single and the person was generally the kind of individual I consider myself compatible with, then yes. Story 24. Can I communicate with them effectively? Probably. I am unsure about the concerns I might have regarding their condition to build a life with them. What precautions would I need to take? Would I need to purchase specialized equipment? Is it genetic? There are many factors to consider, but if I truly liked them, I think I could make it work. Story 25. I would definitely try it. However, I love telling stories and sharing how my day went. My partner is a great listener, so I am not sure if it would last long. Story 26. Sure, no problem. It wasn't quite the same, but my ex-girlfriend had a prosthesis for her foot due to an accident in the past that required amputation. It was never a problem for me. I remember the first time I saw it up close. It was a bit strange that she had no foot when she took the prosthesis off, but that was it. We still had a good relationship and a fulfilling sex life. I would have no issues with someone who was completely deaf and communicated using sign language. When it comes to love, I am willing to learn in order to communicate effectively with each other. I would also accommodate hearing aids. If I needed to speak louder for her to understand me, I would do it. It might be unusual in public, but I wouldn't let that affect our relationship. Story 27. As someone who speaks sign language as a mother tongue, I would say no. Not that I would be against it if it happened, but I wouldn't actively seek a partner who is deaf or uses a hearing aid. I get tired of having to interpret for my mom, but I do it. Nevertheless, living a life interpreting for someone is not what I want. If everyone else in the world were knowledgeable in sign language, that would be different. Story 28. I am primarily attracted to someone's voice, and many people who are deaf do not have developed vocal skills. This is not something I find attractive. However, we can still be friends. Story 29. Sure. Honestly, I think I would be open to dating someone with any kind of physical disability. It just depends on the person and how we connect. Story 30. There are some habits that deaf people have that can be very annoying or embarrassing. As someone who had a deaf grandfather, I find these traits to be deal breakers unless the person is mindful not to exhibit them. For example, farting loudly and unapologetically in public can be a concern. Shouting instead of talking or signing, especially about people who can actually hear them, is also problematic. For instance, if you have friends over and a deaf grandfather yells, "When are your friends leaving? They are doing my head in," Please don't invite Chris again. He's annoying. Thinking he is whispering when he is not, it can be uncomfortable. He could easily sign something subtle instead. Having the television on loud at night, even with subtitles, is another issue. It is similar to someone waking you and shining flashing lights in your eyes when you are trying to sleep. Just mute the television. You can't hear it anyway. Additionally, there are moments when they move around loudly, such as stomping up the stairs. They might not realize it or lack awareness, but over time, it can be annoying. I know there are plenty of ways that hearing people annoy deaf individuals too. However, if I were to date a completely deaf person, I would ask them to agree to sign, since I'm not bad at it, and not try to speak while signing or writing, as that can be confusing. It's understandable but can be quite annoying. If the person agreed to keep the television on mute, as I don't mind subtitles, and did not attempt to speak but rather signed or wrote messages while being tactful and considerate of others, then yes, I would be open to it. Story 31. Am I attracted to them? Do we hold similar morals and values? Can we communicate? So I'm open to learning about a new culture. My spouse has 2 blind parents, and I recognize that being hard of hearing goes beyond just the ability to hear. I don't know American Sign Language, and while I would be willing to learn, I wouldn't date someone while I was learning. I don't think I could be in a relationship with someone I couldn't communicate with from the start. Story 32. My teenager has severe hearing loss and wears hearing aids. She has many friends and has had boyfriends, but I fear the day someone refuses to spend time with her or date her because of something she was born with. Story 33. I don't know American Sign Language, but one summer I spent time with a kid around my age who was deaf, and it made me see things a little differently. I would say that deafness is not a deal breaker, but I would ask for patience regarding my unintended ignorance in some situations. Story 34. Yes, I would love to date someone who speaks sign language as well. We could easily communicate from a distance, even with our mouths full during dinner dates or in loud venues. Many challenges that hearing individuals face could be addressed through sign language. Story 35. Yes, I dated and married such a person. Communication is difficult when she is not wearing her hearing aids. Otherwise, I don't notice a problem. Story 36. It would depend on whether their hearing makes it frustrating to communicate with them. I do not like repeating what I say repeatedly. Story 37. Honestly, yes, but would they even date me? I feel like the older I get, the more I see that when it comes to dating, we tend to gravitate toward people we can relate to. Story 38. I wouldn't mind. My aunt is also deaf. I am sure there would be some adjustments needed, but it would be all right. Story 39. If they can hear me, I don't see any issues other than I speak very softly, so the hearing aids will need to be powerful. Story 40. Yes. Hearing aid? Fine. Cochlear implant? Great. Sign language? I will do my best, and I hope you can read lips. Deaf culture that makes it seem like trying to hear is a problem is not my preference. I live near a state school for the deaf and blind. There is something about deaf culture that feels a bit off to me. Story 41. Absolutely. It doesn't change who they are, and heaven forbid I have to learn a new skill like sign language. Also, when I get into arguments, I wander around mumbling angrily to myself about what I should have said. It would be nice to say, "Honey, can you take out your earbuds for a second? I need to do my emotional processing out loud." Story 42. Sure, I did years ago. He was an interesting person. We liked each other and had some really fun outings, but ultimately decided we weren't compatible. The only difference was getting his attention when his hearing aids were not in use. I learned a little sign language, but he didn't use it much. Story 43. Sure, I would probably want to learn some American Sign Language if the person uses it, just so we can communicate more easily. Story 44. I dated a person who is deaf. He had an insecurity about wearing his hearing aids, which made communication difficult. I ended the relationship for reasons unrelated to his hearing. Story 45. I would. I have poor vision and need to wear glasses all the time, so I also depend on some sort of device for a better quality of life. Story 46. Yes, it just means it's harder to accidentally wake you up at night. It would be a challenge to learn American Sign Language, but it's one I would be willing to tackle for the right person. Story 47. It wouldn't affect my decision either way. I want good people in my life. People with whom you can share good experiences and who help you grow as you help them grow. That's all that matters to me. I have multiple friends and coworkers with various levels of hearing impairment, and the amount that it has ever changed how I feel about any of them or how I see them as people is zero. Story 48. I don't date, but I would not exclude a deaf person if I did. A friend is married to a man who wears hearing aids. She has adjusted to facing him when talking. I wish more people would understand that finding a partner is not like shopping for the perfect outfit or car. There are real human beings with feelings involved. Story 49. Yes, it might be hard to get into such a relationship to begin with for me, as I do not speak American Sign Language fluently, nor do I interact with deaf individuals often. However, I would not refuse a relationship simply because the other person is deaf. Story 50. I was typing a lengthy reply when I reread your question about being born deaf and using hearing aids. I almost started to rant. I grew up with a family member who gradually lost their hearing. I was in denial for some time, but eventually they began using hearing aids. It may also be their personality, but I don't think I can have a relationship with someone like them. At this point, I am not sure if I am naturally loud or just loud because of the family member. Story 51. When I was single, I would learn sign language if it meant we could communicate better. Story 52. Absolutely. My university sweetheart was 50% deaf in his right ear when we met in the lab. 3 years later, he became fully deaf. We communicated through letters, voice chat on our phones, created our own sign language, and learned American Sign Language together, and it was all fine. Eventually, he received cochlear implants, which helped, but we still reverted to our own secret signs. It also didn't hurt that we had a fun and adventurous life together. As long as there is attraction, who cares if someone can hear? I have been told that is the secret to a long marriage. Additionally, he became really good at reading my lips, and not just in a playful way. Story 53. Why not? With a hearing aid, he or she is a normal person just like me as long as he or she is suitable for me. Story 54. That wouldn't bother me. My friend has hearing issues in one ear. I would need to learn sign language better than I currently do. Story 55. Absolutely. I would study sign language as well. Before I met my wife, I had a significant crush on a deaf waitress at my favorite diner. I would go there half for the omelets and half hoping to interact with her. Story 56. I don't care. As long as we can communicate without me learning a sign language, I wish I were more flexible or capable. However, I don't think I'm going to learn American Sign Language anytime soon. Story 57. Absolutely. I will make a better effort at learning sign language. I am still learning and will continue to do so. Story 58. I have a great sound system and some subscriptions that we can enjoy. I might be joining my friend later who uses hearing aids or communicates in American Sign Language. Story 59. Absolutely. I know American Sign Language and intend to become fluent, so communication won't be a problem. Even if I didn't have a past love for American Sign Language, I would still be willing to learn it for him. Story 60. If they didn't mind that I would have to start from zero with learning sign language, I would be willing to learn, but that takes time. Story 61. Yes, I dated one man who wore hearing aids and another who was fully deaf. I learned sign language to communicate with him. Story 62. Absolutely, however, I have a sibling who was born deaf. I'm super comfortable in theory, but my American Sign Language skills need improvement. Story 63. I am deaf in one ear. I function well in the hearing world, and people outside my inner circle usually do not know. I know some American Sign Language, but not enough to get by in the deaf community. However, when I am in those circles, I quickly pick it up. I have a hearing boyfriend, but I would date either if I were single. Story 64. It depends. If their first or preferred language is a sign language, then I wouldn't date them. I have a poor visual memory, making it difficult for me to learn sign languages. This was actually part of my ADHD diagnosis. Good, healthy relationships are founded on communication. I cannot offer that to a deaf person who primarily uses sign languages. They would have to do all the work accommodating me, which wouldn't be fair to them. Additionally, if we had a deaf child, I wouldn't be able to teach them to sign or model accessible communication for any hearing siblings. I would struggle to parent my child until they developed verbal communication or learned to read and write. It would be damaging for a deaf child to have me as their mother. So, I probably wouldn't date a deaf man, but it would be due to my disabilities being a problem, not because I find being deaf unattractive. If they primarily spoke English and I knew we wouldn't have deaf children, I wouldn't have an issue with it. Story 65. Maybe I was asked out by a deaf person once, but I canceled the date, not because he's deaf. I honestly talk so much and feel uneasy if things are too quiet. I think I would be exhausting for someone who is hard of hearing. I desperately need to be heard, and I might come across as too self-centered. Story 66. Legit, why wouldn't I? I suppose you'd start to turn people away only when their level of spoken communication ability is low to none. However, wearing a hearing aid implies they can hear with assistance. Personally, I am trying to learn my country's native sign language, so I wouldn't be so quick to say no. It would be motivation to learn. Story 67. I am deaf and have never had a problem dating. If you were born deaf, a hearing aid would not help. Implants would, however. Story 68. Her name was Candy. She was very lovely and taught me some basic sign language. Unfortunately, she is a female, so we had a cake with fruit made with more cake. It's fine. She was very cool. If you want to really get to know someone, spend time together and communicate without words. Story 69. Sure, but I do wonder what communication would be like. If they wear hearing aids, then that shouldn't be a problem. Story 70. I wouldn't, only because I have a stutter and that would be difficult for them, especially if they read lips. Story 71. Certainly. Alternatively, with a cochlear implant, or if someone is deaf without any of the above, they would need to be patient and willing to communicate through typing as I learn American Sign Language. Story 72. I would. This stuff is not a problem for me, and I will do whatever is in my power to support the one I chose. Story 73. Hypothetically speaking, since I am happily taken, it would not affect their chances negatively in any way. Story 74. I see no reason not to. Even if they didn't have access to hearing aids, if we were able to connect and were interested in each other, I would start relearning American Sign Language or something. I hit my head very hard and do not remember things very well now. Story 75. I would be a bit sad they couldn't fully hear me sing, but I am also a loud sneezer, light snorer, and project when I talk, so that might actually be a bonus. I would be excited to learn sign language through immersion as well. Story 76. Having a partner who can turn down the volume when I get loud is truly beneficial. I also have a soft spot for responding to screaming children with a twinkling smile and a quick turn of a dial. It reminds me of my grandfather. Story 77. I'm sorry, I didn't understand that. Could you please say it a little louder? No problem, I'll come over there. Story 78. If I liked him, then yes. I actually knew someone who wore a hearing aid, and I would have dated him if he had asked me. Story 79. Sure, why not? I am more concerned about whether she can be trusted to be faithful more than anything else. As long as she is basically a good person, I am in. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.